继续 Braid 时空幻境的周年重制版 Commentary Playthrough 还有几张来着？记得还有3张是吧？这一期应该是从World 5开始 ，5 6，然后一个 7括号1括号 Number 1，再加一个终章。这一期如果能搞完的话，下一期就可以打1次 Speed Run。对，先从 World 5开始啊，这个难道还能进去的吗？啊，是涌动的是吧？再进去老子还得再绕一圈。这些应该看过了是吧 ？Time and Decision 上一期最后好像我想想啊，对看过。Right， 那这个应该也看过，走。
What about the things
of hey the world you read
new
your
world
universe
the
as
other
well.
at the exact move
Is there that wasn't there before?
now he can't run through it or something
etc.
lands on one yet.
Yes.
So distant， 这个 BGM 开始诡异了呢。
Much effort went into the remastering of the track Undercurrent, as the original is somewhat intense and potentially annoying when playing over several times. This is partly due to the nacelle quality of the lead cello, some cluttering in the mid-range of the spectrum, and an overall narrow stereo field. So in this case the stems came in handy, and they were all processed and improved individually before added to the final mix. For the solo part, played on an electric cello, the nacelle quality was caused by a small spike around 1200 Hz. Interestingly, this spike got evened out by way of match EQ when using an acoustic cello recording as reference. A match EQ allows you to analyze the frequency spectra of a target and a reference sounds respectively, and then calculate an EQ curve based on the difference between the two. In this case, the resulting EQ curve, illustrated in orange, represents the treatment that the electric cello needed in order to adopt the spectral makeup of the acoustic cello. Generally, the original mix was quite narrow in terms of stereo width, which was primarily solved by adding width to the original stems, giving each instrument its own defined space in the mix. You can hear the difference between the final mixes by toggling between the original and remastered version.
Jamie Sieber 可能就是他是吧？他制作的这一段一段。
World 5 is about a choice and about a crossroads.
Crossroad.
What would happen given two different decisions? And because of the time bending here, we're actually able to experience both. So when you rewind, we get a shadow version running in parallel with the other, where you have two Tims doing two different things with two outcomes. Narratively, this is about a decision and going in two very different directions. One being a kind of domestic safety and security, and the other being a kind of wilderness of some kind, like to stay or to leave. And so we have all these domestic things that look like not only domestic but like very nice, very opulent and comfortable, that are thrown into a swamp, that are combined with like nautical motifs as well, large wooden columns you might see on a pier or the mast of a ship, and yet you've got like big comfy duvets and pillows and things like that. So there's a contradiction here, and we get to see the confused intersection of these two possible futures, I guess.
这个应该很多都看过了吧？
Most of the levels,
Right.
hopefully, called it handy.
名字的问题。
Right. Even if they forget the initial conditions.
Right.
So the initial conditions are
The
important.
initial conditions are important.
So we notice that the key, like ours, the solution in this.
Make this gap from the visible.
There's this universe thing to give us the key.
Right. 这还有这个 alternative design。Fuck.
This is a little bit of a violation. Whether this
violation.
Doesn't quite. It's not really something that people complain about the game, so maybe it's fine.
All right.
在底下是吗？这是原话。
This is already a pretty developed concept for World 5, and it's exploring how to represent the key time behavior of World 5, which is that you can create a parallel universe where your shadow self goes out and does horrible deeds on your behalf, or nice things. Here we see Tim jumping across a gap, and then not depicted as he rewinds, and then the shadow goes and jumps across the gap and jumps and kills this little creature. I guess this idea was that we could replace the background with a kind of screen and then project a lot of light. You see the light shining, and then the shadow world would just be the shadow. So it's pretty straightforward. We ended up doing something in a way more subtle that wouldn't replace the entire background, but it's kind of a neat idea.
And it is very you to want a shadow world.
Is it? I resent that. I think also there's I like playing with theatrical motifs for some reason. So there are these hanging curtains. I think with the lights look like theatrical stage lights maybe, and then the what's it called when you have like shadow puppets?
Is it just called shadow puppets?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's called shadow puppets.
This is just showing the visual development of World 5. I guess this earliest one does look the most like some piers, like a pier you would walk down with some weird sheet metal that's used a bit unrealistically. I do like the colors here. I like that light blue that's combined with the brown and the red. As it progresses, there's more detail. There's more of these home interior things like the rugs and the pillows, which we talk about elsewhere. And then the background becomes more light, first of all, more value difference, and more fragmented, more abstracted. I think I drew this because I just like this moment in the game so much. It's not that useful as far as the game development, except that it got me imaginatively involved in this scene. But actually, there's not much I did in the game to enhance the scene beyond just building the scenery around it. I mean, it's a very memorable moment because of how you solve this puzzle and the way it feels and what it makes you think about. But really, like, the environment design doesn't support it in any particularly overt way. It's kind of understated. But I did want to explore this moment and show the emotion of how it might feel as Tim to receive this treasure, this key, from yourself as your shadow self is falling to his death. This is a weird one. I'm not really sure when it was made. It has this kind of red clay look, similar to the last concept with the shadow key handoff. There's a lift. I mean, there's certainly like moving platforms and lifts in the game, but yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a weird oddity.
这个什么东西啊？特定的视角是吧？2D 的这个游戏给你搞个3D 的视觉设计图，就感觉很奇怪啊。这个是5-4是吧？哦，大概有点感觉了。嗨，怎么过去了呢？啊，然后就到这个 crossing the gap 了。
So, well, the troll had a familiar and
Oh, he's kind of
a complex Boolean circuit hovering over each troll. Okay, just kidding.
Just kidding.
In the original game, the parallel universe mechanic is illustrated sonically by adding a muffled delay to the music using real-time DSP. While it does a good job in communicating the idea, the result is musically somewhat messy as the mid-range get cluttered and the delay time doesn't match the tempi of the tracks.
Tempi.
In order to solve this, we created bespoke offline or pre-rendered versions of the parallel universe music, which would simply fade in and out to simulate the original effect. In this way, it became possible to utilize the delays musically, as well as finding more creative ways of treating the delayed layer than simply adding a low pass filter. To keep the track balanced, the delayed materials were processed, often using pitch shifting. So for example, the delayed version of the cello lead would play an octave below the original.
口音虽然很重，但不算啰嗦。
Alright, so next thing you can have, but
There might tell you scratch, maybe that's on it. So could fall down. Healing, and I need the monster for that. And that's why it's one of my favorite puzzles in the game, if not my favorite.
what do you think?
6分38。
Where
You like?
so magical has way off and magicness. Without sacrificing other parts of it, I probably would.
With what?
Somehow. I just don't know how to do that, right? And then, as we mentioned a minute ago, if it's too easy,
Then
maybe it's not good because your mind didn't engage with it.
bye bye. Window of opportunity.
This area is one of the ones that I identified early on as a good candidate for upgrading. It's another case
越到后面越少。
there's a natural spatial distinction here that can be enhanced by adding a bit more window dressing. This enclosed area contains a puzzle,
Okay.
and you're likely to go in there and mess around a bit before exiting, so enhancing that inside-outside distinction was a natural way to go. And in this case, there were some visual cues that I could pick up on, like these drapes, or I think of it as kind of a
What's a drape?
rolled up sail puzzle, and you're likely to go in there and mess around a bit before exiting, so enhancing that inside-outside distinction was a natural way to go. And in this case, there were some visual cues that I could pick up on, like these drapes, or I think of it as kind of a rolled up sail, but also drapes. It's a bit confused, but it kind of functions both ways. I could extend that motif into these hanging drapes in the background.
Yeah.
In the second real that and some full strategies.
To try wiki,
Yeah, exactly. It does not have the purple glow. Good point.
yeah.
Maybe when he flickers out, maybe he's still going on and living his life, but you can no longer interact.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I like the hearth. It felt like a really natural addition. The hearth is the center of the home, figuratively and often literally, and I think it really places us in the middle of the home. Of course, we're still outside, so there's that contradiction that we have throughout the world. Something strange here is the scale is obviously off from Tim, and I guess that's true throughout here with all the really large drawers and stuff like that. But I feel like it's a kind of dissonance that's usually we don't draw as much attention to. It's only a product necessity because you couldn't really depict these things satisfactorily if they were all at Tim's scale, I think. But I guess this is the fantasy world, so the size is a bit mixed up.
Mm-hmm. Ah, 容易锻炼。
So then there's this fun. We have to use our hand.
放的。
Me,
Up how one's relaxed.
the player is twitchy.
Mhm.
Is that like twitchy runtime and twitchy compile time?
Oh, both.
Oh no,
Twitchy coding
I
time?
certainly didn't think about that at the time.
At a time.
Yeah.
So then with the monster was programmed because wouldn't it be fun, guys? That was yeah. Well, honey, this is pretty close circle I'm hitting. I also like many appealing. You may
啊，
think
今天
about
看
who
的
else
这
in
个
the，game is wearing armor,
他后面也没讨论到这个
and so
骑士跟这怪的 BOSS 之间的关系。
So then I
啊，居然看不到。
like the other things.
I would. That's a 9.
There aren't specific question that you just said is not exactly the way that I think about it.
Okay. Here he's doing his famous KG act, people.
KG Act。
But yeah, there's other. But yeah, there's other fun. You know, it's just this guy you drop not as so it's not
Or, I mean,
duration.
I could have made. I mean, Braid took 2.5 years.
3.5.
3.5.
total.
Okay, so that's like
It's like 2 looms at least,
two,
right?
2 or 3 looms. Yeah.
Yeah.
主要这个东西是碎掉了，否则可以一波清的，可以一锅端的，这就很慢了。这个就比较慢了。一左一右，一左一右，啊，大概知道有这么一个思路就可以了。Fragile Companion，
I like the fact that a couple.
这肯定看不
It's just if I wanted to do
马
the
上就要
shot,
结束了。
but you can jump actually standing right before the gate, and as long as you rewind, the guy will hit it, and that's sort of the speed run
Speed
way
run.
to do it, right?
The early versions of
Watch.
this castle were not as messed up looking. In fact, it was not all busted. It was more intact, but there was a theme of duality with like 2 windows and like 2 kind of pieces projecting forward with kind of a staircase going up in between them. And here it's evolved a bit, but we still have the 2 stained glass windows with the princess facing us and also running away. Overall, this is a lot more destroyed and messed up looking.
I'm still getting sort of that naive feeling of the princess solves all my problems.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
It kind of looks like one of those popsicles you break in half. That is 2, there's 2 popsicle sticks.
Popsicle sticks.
I haven't seen those in a long time.
Neither have I.
That's probably still a thing.
Yeah, it also looks like the 10 Commandments, which Moses broke in half, actually.
I'm lost. How are you? OK, World 6，这个大概也看过。
It is very easy. We're on the same team in some way, and there kind of ain't that many people on that team, is what I feel like.
来 ，Wow, damn！
And then World 6 again to promote some.
这是那个公式了是吧？
And
戒
you
指还是公
also
式？
This point is.
yeah, playable at one point. I know maybe it's not. You jump on monsters,
Right.
you do it, and you find that there's something you didn't think of. Or
Right,
whatever,
right. But this one worked, so
it was
wasn't
fun. I
necessary,
started
yeah.
doing it, and I found it was cool, and there was enough to do with it. Right.
Right.
The first thing that jumps out to me here that's new, of course, are the fog particles that are hand animated running a frame stack, which is a new thing we're doing in the remake. And it created this whole new style of particles. I guess we had to ask ourselves, is this Braid-like? And I guess we felt it fit in and supplemented nicely the other stuff we had going. And there's more prominent glow from the torches, which I think enhances the atmosphere.
Well, and it's also suggestive of the title screen.
In terms of the kind of orangey flame
Yeah.
and everything.
Well, that's what I'm getting out of it. So put it in the game.
I buy it.
So when you're talking about the new effects, are you talking about the sort of color cycling I'm seeing on the flames?
Yeah, there's the flames have this sort of color cycling. I guess they're just like generating particles with more like hue variance, so it's jittering the color around. And it also is casting on the fog, so it's like a nice combination. The slowdown ring is the central new time game mechanic in this stage, and actually looking at the SD version, I think John just did this himself. I don't remember having much input here, and that kind of like speaks to what development was like on that first one, which is to say just kind of more direct and trying to get the game done, and not everything got like a second look or whatever. We certainly took care overall, but some things like that just went in the game. On the remake, it was all about the polish phase. I mean, the entirety of the Braid remaster project was like that last 10%. So
OK，
You just put it off.
yeah. So there's a new ring that I did build from a lot of particles, and I like it. I don't know if I have anything clever to say about it. I guess one thing about the new slowdown ring is it projects out further. There's like a subtle effect that goes out beyond the obvious bounds of the ring, and it just has more differentiated parts that behave differently.
In World 6, the notion of remastering is expanded to include remixing, if not to say decomposition and redesign of the original tracks. Throughout the game, the worlds gradually become darker, a feature that isn't really echoed in the music. Rather, in the original game, the same handful of tracks keeps playing, eventually resulting in a mismatch between visuals and music. This is most noticeable in World 6, where the darkness is accompanied by tracks such as Downstream, previously associated with the Sunny World 2. The reuse of tracks in the original game also takes a bit away from the excitement of having made progress, and the tracks naturally start suffering from wear and tear as well. The new, darker versions of the tracks generally became more ambient in nature, which caused a problem related to World 6 game mechanic, namely the ring that slows down time. John had originally selected the tracks on the basis that they would remain somewhat recognizable even when slowed down considerably. So while working with more drony materials, we had to retain some transient information that would translate properly when slowed down. Working from the original stereo mix, the general idea was to make the track more foreboding and suspenseful.
啊，这个听过的。
The rhythm is made to sound more like a beating heart, and the continuous drones are processed with a tremolo effect. To make this possible, the original track was divided into drum and harmonic part using D-Mix Pro. Here's the extracted drum part. And now the harmonic part. Dividing the original track into drum and harmonic part didn't come without obvious artifacts, so a lot of post-processing had to be done. Here's how the treated drum parts sound like. And now the harmonic part. While the redesigned version of the track was very moody and fitted the artwork, it had too little content that remained audible when pitched down by the game. Luckily stems came in, which helped to solve this issue. The fifth and final iteration includes elements from the first version, but the melody is now reintroduced, both because it became possible with stems available, but also because the cello was an important element when pitching down the music.
不知道他说的这个 stem 什么意思？
So World 6 doesn't have the most changes as far as like scenery
这
or
肯定看过。
additions, but it has one of the biggest pervasive changes, which is the
那
color palette.
color palette，
And I was never really happy with the color palette in the old because
这
from
看过。
12. And so there, it's like a
Right, because we're in the thick of it at this point, right? It doesn't get
lounge with like low light and kind of like a slinky atmosphere or something like that.
One goal of the Romanesque
这个应该没看
redesign
过。
was, ironically, to make it less romantic. This was primarily achieved by removing the higher notes, which carried much of the romantic harmonization. What's left is a simple modal vamp, and consequently the track also became darker, which was another goal of the redesign. However, by getting rid of the higher notes, we ran into the same issue as with Undercurrent, namely that the track became too blurry when
Too
pitched down.
blurry。
So I added the transients of the original into the mix. These are quite
Frequency.
subtle and not very noticeable when playing at normal speed, but when the track is pitched down, they make a huge difference.
嘿，
The redesigned version also had to sound more ambient and full to accompany the cityscape in the visuals, so a smeared version of the harp bass, along with a pitched down version for sub bass, were added to the composition.
I guess there's sort of a carnival aspect to this
这没看过。
lantern thing with the wedding dress inside.
嘿，
This is another case where developing the parallax meant breaking this thing into parts that would move differently. And yeah, there's some art and technique to like breaking it up in a way that's functional so that it doesn't separate and break down when it parallaxes. So the pieces are cut very carefully in areas where there's a horizontal stretch that can move across itself without breaking. And yeah, there's even depth within the chamber there with the wedding dress figure moving separately from its background and separately from the foreground. So I don't know, it's kind of an eerie thing, I think. Like it has a kind of strange feeling that it's like watching you or tracking you a little bit. It's a subtle effect.
我都没看到这里面居然还有婚纱哎！不说我真没看到。
So World 6. So
Okay, really what it little well, you know, the judgment of a visual pleasantness that makes you not mind it so much.
嗯哼，slow down design，这底下还有2个东西
And then worlds.
Ah,
no,
okay.
goes, "Virtually,
这个
so
刚
we're
才
in-
slow down
okay,
design
this
是那
is
戒指，
two floors.
是那戒指
When we're sitting, how do we topple?
啊，是对，然后这个
You'll but they're in levels. Two shakes the slow down.
And now again, you have
And muzzle that about instead of our square to like problem solve with because you don't get yeah it's
yeah.
very yeah.
I like this building facade here to the right of the trellis with all the windows. This is a thing that could have just like an overbearing sense of repetition with all those little windows, but it's fragmented and broken up into dissolving into abstraction kind of with the particles in front, causing the windows to sort of shift around or vanish and reappear. Yeah, you can see that motif of like the world dissolving into brushstrokes or dissolving into its elements, working in an interesting way here with these like architectural motifs that have so much regularity to them. Actually, it's harder for me to do architecture. I like working with irregularity, and in fact, like a lot of these architectural things are like kind of organic in a sense because I like to work that way, but it's also referencing the organic stuff earlier in the game and trying to draw contrast.
Cascade，这一关难道还有什么东西吗？我靠，不仅有，而且还是视觉、听觉全部都有。OK， 这儿没有 ，It's not bad。难得练这儿，
and then cast
这个不用看。
frequency
罕见对 Doctor 来说，
or
罕
again,
见
because I
428
understand the
啊，哪儿这儿是吧？晃，哎呀，还没到。OK， 3发要3发，2发应该肯定是够了。这个地方我的操作还是偏弱，肯定不需要3发。
These are really
What's
cool to
awesome
me because I can see they're World 6. We're
Yeah.
into a very advanced state of human development of like very elaborate architecture that's way beyond functional. It's highly decorative, but it looks nothing like World 6, at least at first. This one with a hideous green and purple. Actually, I had to dig into a PSD to find it. I had not saved it out into a JPEG. I probably never showed it to John. It was just a thing I went through when I was getting to something else. Really weird colors. I like a lot this one with the blue backdrop, although we normally try to go for stronger contrast and more color difference between foreground and background.
And it's not imposing to me.
True. It's really not imposing. It doesn't have the right tone for World 6. It's actually kind of like a Zora domain or something. It feels like aquatic and relaxing even.
I would hang out there. I wouldn't hang out in any of these other screens.
Yeah. Some of these later ones go in a darker direction, and you can see some of the elements that are going to show up in World 6, like the costumes, the figures in these kind of archways. Again, I like these because they're unlike what's in the game, but I'm exploring different motifs and different decorative patterns and rhythms. I have to say I'm less in my element doing architecture, but I'm trying to find elements that I can repurpose, and Braid brings its own challenges because the physical shapes of the foreground and the solid objects within the scene get smaller and smaller compared to World 2, which has like a large ground area where you can do a lot of grass and rocks that fade to darkness. Here, I'm making things that are smaller that have to fit together with enough structural coherency to at least look like platforms and walls and stuff. But I'm trying to find decorative motifs that support the atmosphere.
OK，
Here I see a lot of the same architectural elements. I'm copying pasting from the other concepts, and
风格完全
and
不
this
一
is
样。
based on a actual level layout. There's some additional stuff, but I recognize this area from World 6. Again, they're moving platforms that have animals on them. This didn't show up in the game. It still has this blue kind of aquatic feeling thing, but also kind of marble, maybe like a Roman influence, but just kind of weird. We're seeing more of these figures in the back. They're in robes. That one looks like Orko from He-Man. We're getting closer and closer to the final look. It's much darker. That's the biggest change.
这个 team 怎么变了个脸？
And we have these kind of lurid color lights illuminating these statues, which are costumes or social roles without any humans inside. We have a kind of marble foreground with a lot of detailed carvings that have an organic feeling. Again, I'm more comfortable doing organic stuff, but also there was a concept of trying to underscore the progression towards artificial structures by, in fact, using organic motifs. But we've been in a forest, we've been in the plains and the hills, and now those things are kind of a memory depicted in this artificial form. More and more development of the architectural elements. It's a bit awkward for me because I'm trying to make things that are modular, that'll fit into the available space, which is often pretty small. But I'm using kind of arch motif and these funny tracks that are gonna maybe have lights on them. The foregrounds become really white. Since the background is dark, we can have a really white foreground for strong contrast there. But I'm trying to keep some color in and trying to figure out how to use color. So actually there's a lot of different kind of almost pastel colors present. I think I remained ambivalent about the colors in this world until the end. I can tell from the elements in here that I'm pretty far along in developing the art for World 6, but I'm second guessing myself on the color palette. In particular, the background. We have a white kind of marble foreground, but the background, I wasn't sure I liked what I was working with, which was like red lights and red and blue, but I wasn't sure how to balance that. I do like some of these backgrounds that go more towards amber or ochre or like orangey lights. Feels maybe a little bit too much like the title screen, like the city in the title screen, and we're not looking at that city exactly. We have to be in another place. I can see I'm playing with blues, teals, and purples also, which again is interesting. We got back to that much later, but that's not what we did in the original game.
难得来了一段长的，很久没有这么长了，因为基本都已经看过了。John， 啊，这好多。All right. 好。
This was a level in the original game that was rather noisy.
我去。
There are cannons shooting constantly all over, making the sound a cacophony you can't really decode or get any useful information from. Furthermore, this constant noise disturbs the mood of the music, so all in all, sound loses its purpose here and you get tired, and a lot of people probably turned off audio at this point in the game, unfortunately. So, here we needed to clean up the whole mix to make it communicate the gameplay better, meaning that only the most relevant sounds at any given moment should be heard. That would also make it less enervating and give room for the mood of the music. First thing is that the original cannons didn't really sound like cannons, so you don't instinctively link these sounds to anything meaningful relating to the gameplay. Though of course at this point in the game you will probably have learned what the sound is, so this is more an issue in the earlier levels. And then furthermore, there were only 2 different shot sounds in the original game, making it even more monotonous. They were these 2 sounds, and the impacts were like this. So we designed all new shots and impact sounds that had more hints of powder and fire and had much more variation in them. The only thing we kept from the original sound effects was the very characteristic little attack sound that to us made it keep the Braid signature. So this is how the new sounds ended up. and here are some of the bullet impacts. Secondly, we tweaked a lot on the overall volume and listening ranges of each cannon in this level to make sure you only hear the immediately relevant cannons and shots. And thirdly, but probably most important, we introduced stereo panning of sounds. Because in the original game, all sounds played heart center, but by introducing stereo panning, we opened up the whole audio image, making it much easier for the brain to decode and point out what objects make which sound. A small note on the cannon shots and impact is that, as mentioned, they are completely redone from scratch except for the very small attack sound. But because we wanted all sounds in the game to be kept in this expressionistic art style like in organic painting, we didn't focus so much on sounds from actual shots and cannons, but more on small chemical reactions and strange sparks and puffs. So here are some of the elements that these shots consist of. And then this is how it ended up, the remastered sounds when shooting a normal bullet and shooting monsters and finally shooting clouds.
啊，不同的声音不一样。Impassable foliage.
The next solution would be what make controller alter use element to
Too often, but it can be an interesting space to explore.
Downstream, with its light, happy feel, was probably the track that felt most out of place in the context of World 6. Accordingly, it was the track that needed the most substantial treatment. Unfortunately, it was also one of the tracks for which we didn't manage to acquire stems, which ultimately meant that we have to sacrifice clarity for the sake of mood. Luckily though, the track plays towards the end of World 6, where the player is already familiar with the ring game mechanic, and the music no longer needs to do the heavy lifting in terms of communicating this to the player. One goal of the redesign was to make the music appear slower. This was primarily done by replacing the 6/8 feel with straight 4/4. Also, the harmonic progressions in the track are simplified, overriding many modulations, in this way making it more dark and grounded. Again, the track was split into rhythmic and harmonic content using the DMix Pro algorithm. However, because the track is very active tonally, it was necessary to take a more drony approach to the redesign. To ensure recognizability, some elements were isolated using Melodyne, including a small violin motif. Here's a small snippet of the original track. And here's how it sounds when isolating the violin using the Melodyne software. Splitting rhythmic from harmonic materials was quite complicated in this track, and with no stems available, I ended up doing some drum replacement, or rather addition, using a sampled medieval drum. The extracted drum of the original track was analyzed in Melodyne, and the resulting MIDI data was used to trigger the drum, determining both timing and velocity of each drum hit. In this way, although adding sounds felt a bit like cheating, at least the original performance was kept. Let's hear how it sounds when the rhythmic content is extracted from the original track. Now let's hear the same part, but with the drum replacement. And finally, let's hear how it sounds when combining the two and adding a lot of processing.
it adds, and it each other until you. There are times while they're all really hard and like have an expert solution. Many puzzles that doesn't happen, but when I was able to do it, I liked it.
哦，还真有这个击鼓的声音，只是不是很响。
In order to add variation and avoid wearing out the tracks, I did some processing on the music when the player enters the puzzle screens. The presence of the instruments is reduced by way of attenuating mono content, high frequency spikes and transients, and adding first reflections. The goal was to make it sound like the music was playing from the next room. You can hear the difference by entering and exiting the puzzle screens in the different levels.
Okay. Saw elevator action. 这些应该都看过。
Elevator, like
So elevator. I think
it doesn't go anywhere.
and then you.
Whereas here, because it's really wonderful to see it done well. Braid's visuals are very, very dependent.
啊，这看过了，9分15秒像 particle， 对，应该比较后期 programming 的这个东西。
This, since if you let the exact bring any every single frame, whether we are going forward or backward, the particles don't really exist at all between frames, as we don't keep their data at all.
Over here on the right side of the stage, we have some unique background elements. One is a kind of theatrical proscenium, like a stage, with light shining, but there's no one there. Again, this could reference like artificiality. I guess I'm often drawn to like theatrical motifs, and like I want to do something like that with the cloud screen, but we didn't. So there's that idea of like putting on an act, performing artificiality, reading your lines. And then to the left of that, a pair of, I mean, I think of these as looking like football helmets with like a mouth guard and a top part, but they're kind of strange and alien looking. I guess, again, just a kind of role. I guess I'm just interpreting my own work right now, but I noticed they're pointing in opposite directions. Maybe this represents a kind of rivalry, maybe. But they're also kind of like balconies or empty spaces that somebody could inhabit.
Yeah, I'm seeing the like theater box seats.
Yeah. That works too.
Also seeing pawns or whatever that chess piece is.
Yeah, that does look like a rook, I guess.
Rook.
Right?
Yeah, rook, sure. Never played chess.
Okay.
But yeah, they look like rooks.
They look like rooks.
I said that most
啊 ，particle 来了。呀，这么看，这期还真不一定能把 epilogue 差不多搞定。那不如放在下一期的这个 speed run 之后了。In another castle，啊，这 design 肯定看过了，就是 pass 的。
Here in another castle. This is
Zone
another
Kong levels.
It in more thought. Elevator. It's wonderful that it can fall through the air with the key and continue working.
Oh yeah.
Right, because at first you might think the ring is a thing which lives on stationary objects.
Stationary objects.
I try not to lock things down until the last possible minute, but with graphic games.
啊，这个是那个谁是吧
And you know.
Mark Ten Bosch.
I think I don't think I ever did. I think be gentle on us. We worked so hard for you.
It's true.
Okay, so you added a ton of these statues here, right?
Yeah, so in this stage, you know, this is the end, and that sense of distance and cold remove is stronger than ever. The city is farther away, and there's all this empty space, so it was a good opportunity to put in some castle approach stuff. Now, usually we only put those things in after the puzzles are done, but this is a short stage and there just wasn't room for it. Luckily, there's not much action that happens in the middle of the screen here, so it doesn't conflict or distract a whole lot. Mostly you're doing stuff up above. So these are just more costumes, more social roles. I think it's kind of fun to like put together these very different types, like the priest, the soldier, and then the punk lady after that. concluding this through line of costumes, we have Tim in his underwear and undershirt looking caught off guard. And Tim himself is turned into like a statue, you know, with on a podium with a plaque, kind of for observation by others, exposed.
这个其实很有寓意的。Are you sure she exists? 然后就是 Chapter 1，看是能看得完，但 Epilogue 这个具体的剖析我来压了那看来，来吧，这肯定有东西，但全部都 design 上。
Time is
Bi-directional.
And that's the details. There's more like intermediate things that happen in that level, but it was basically the same idea.
So then
Pretty easy.
Okay, this is an intro. Get used to things going backwards. Isn't that interesting? Is a world in its own right. And then there we go. What were we talking about? Yes, the sequence. And being of a different size is fine. Also, the epilogue is also, you know, a few screens.
Right, yeah.
If the epilogue had 12 different things to do, it would be a very different experience, and I'm not sure. Like, design would have to change in some way.
Right.
Let's talk about the physics thing.
So Mike,
Variant system. This would be. How do we make it right?
little volcano where like time you'd press the key after you unfell back up to the platform.
Yeah, I thought about that kind of stuff, and I couldn't come up with anything.
Yeah.
In Braid, this idea recorded back at all. I have this little insert ship the game like forward, and it should look exactly like the regular game.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes you need tools to get things done.
So now I'm going sort of back to more general questions. And what's interesting are your
I don't know if I've
So now I'm going sort of with
a little bit like the game, like that stone is in the foundation of the thing that you built, and you can't do a lot about it, except try again next time now that you're a better designer. Right?
I
actually don't have that man.
这个没什么东西，这肯定看过。
Played by the troll, like a super friend who's always like resurrecting them and debunking them.
Could be.
And wow.
Could be.
This world progresses excitingly towards more activity, more chaos, but from here you don't know that. You just see, it looks like, you know, post some kind of destruction, but it's quiet. I think it's like there's not too much activity. We're just looking at some rubble in the background and kind of hazy atmosphere.
Are there elements of past stages here?
Yeah, I think it was John's idea to have this world be kind of a mashup of other worlds, like they were all colliding together. Here the intensity is ramping up a bit and there's more activity in the particles. We have these vapor being kind of sucked into the ground somehow in the sky. Particles are drawing on the clouds and there's a kind of a more disrupted, scribbly character to them, and you're beginning to see like particles unmoored from the background, kind of free floating. This is a concept for World 1, and it's the final confrontation, the climax of the game. I remember John specifically saying we wanted to avoid, like, after seeing this, we don't want it to feel like Mordor, which I agree with.
Mordor.
This stonework, it's very organic, it's not very logical. It looks like teeth or like a jaw. And I noticed what looks like a, you know, kind of a Romeo and Juliet balcony, which is apt. And the blue sky, like things emerging from this blue haze. I don't know. I guess that blue is always very powerful to me. Like, it's an uncanny blue because blue is the conventional sky color that is generally comforting and normal. And this is a kind of a rich blue it's a pretty blue, but it's kind of like a stalking blue or a sulking blue or something. And the way the scenery fades back into it does not really feel normal. It's a kind of like oblivion blue or something. I like this one. It's exciting to me, and it has a strong resemblance to the game. So I feel like this was actually a very useful piece of concept art to do, although unusual for us to do this sort of perspective, which is unlike the game. The palette is all here, the kind of sense of wild gesture coming off of the forms, the green spiky bushes with the dark interiors and the little shocks of red or orange, kind of progressing towards this order on the right side with the house up on the cliff. All of this chaos and energy compressing into a kind of unnatural order that you can't quite trust or believe in. This is just an oddity I dug up. I don't know why I did this. I guess I'm just trying to think about the feeling that we're trying to capture in the end. This doesn't look like anything in the game. This is where Tim hopes to finally encounter the princess. Is she going to come out onto that balcony and look down at him? Will she let down her hair? What kind of story are we in? What's in there? This is not a house from my life. This is a made-up house. But you know what I think of? I kind of feel like I was anticipating moving to the Bay Area, which I did halfway through working on
这个
Braid.
就最后呢，
I'd gone to San Francisco already and met John and attended GDC, and I was really excited about the whole game industry world, and the Bay Area was so beautiful.
这样的吗？
And since moving there, in fact, years after moving there, I remember walking around Diamond Heights, maybe Noe Valley-ish, Glen Park-ish, and seeing houses up on cliffs that look just like this. So, I don't know. I was trying to put some of that Bay Area feeling into it. It's really the counterpart to the title screen on the bridge. It's the far extreme opposite end of the line. This is where you're trying to get to. And so I wanted to, it's kind of a sibling to that, give a sense of video gamey linear progression that terminates, and just the way the bridge is the beginning of moving forward, that line, that stripe across the screen. This house is just kind of like a station, like a train station or something. It's the end of the line, and it's kind of interesting to see it take form from this boxier version, getting larger, but also at one point getting these swoops and curves, which I moved away from towards this angular version with the roof kind of dented in the middle. I guess there are like homes around the Bay Area that have this funny nautical look with like the railings, like the balcony there. I haven't thought a lot about like, okay, the princess is rich, but I guess that's just because she's a princess. But if we wanted to contradict that princess fantasy image further, she could be in a more modest home. But I guess she's in like an expensive house that would be the equivalent of a castle.
The San Francisco equivalent of a castle.
Yeah. So maybe she is a princess. We don't know for sure that she's not a princess.
It looks like it has one of those back entrances that's like, you know, when you're driving on a road and all you see is like maybe a garage and like the rest of it's built under. You know what I mean? It kind of reminds me of that, which I've only seen in the Bay Area.
哎，这个是那个啊，没问题。所以这个房子也是根据，哎，这不太一样了，根据现实中的混合出来的。OK， 1杠1的话，考虑到连贯性，我估计应该不会有任何的 commentary。我觉得，马来复习一下，下一期肯定要打 speedrun， 还有时间是吧？还有时间的话 ，epilogue 看一下也不是不行。啊，首先要把 epilogue 的这个 commentary 看完。这关肯定没东西。 关键这个点。对，这只要踩上去，然后这边需要等一下，这样就那边过。啊，哪来打了我？哪来打来？这里只能等。现在也不一定需要等。对，这个存档应该已经信心拿起了，所以可以打。被黑 area， 然后直接开始冲了。讲道理，这里真正奇怪的是 ，Team 不应该往外跑，应该整个人倒退回去。这地方还是有点，每看一次还是觉得奇怪。它不算是真正的 rewind。如果这个是真实发生的事情，之前玩的是 rewind 的话，那方向也不对。不管你说哪个是 original， 哪个是 rewind， 它的两个方向朝向都应该是一样的。而现在 team 朝左，刚刚我脸朝右。那下一次45分钟应该是能做了。但如果犯大错了，那就不行。关键是能打了多少时间？打到 S 前无聊一曲还真能打一次。可以再打一次，就看音乐跟这个美术有多长了。现在看起来都还行，音乐可能不是很长。就音乐那个区域你要好好解一下。play through 反正到这儿就结束了，这是搞定。这样3期，13期1期3期已经花了17期了是吧？对，17期，25期可能有希望，不好说。因为 visual 跟这个 art 都已经看了一部分了。嘛，最后 epilogue 有是肯定有的。还有时间是吧？これはどうでもいい。
So I'm breaking the pattern
お前の声はもうどうでもいい。
to that point, but I'm not in danger of disrupting the game because this is a tiny part at the end, right?
因为 epilogue 解谜就是 hidden text， 不是这种绿的书，这种绿的书全部是白色的，红的书是关键。能不能听到这个 artist？ 啊，这里居然听不到。那可能你这。是不是因为啊？对，因为现在看的是 commentary， 不是那个标准。对，不是标准，那就无所谓。先把 commentary 看完，然后回到正常的世界去看流程。
So there's almost maybe a feeling of leaving the castle behind, walking away from it, because we do have a castle in the background here.
Correct.
Yeah, I think the castle back there is,
已经1个小时了。
to me, just another
还是放下去吧。
misplaced element. The castle was once your end goal. Like maybe at the end of World 2, Tim thought he'd arrived until he was told the princess was in another castle. And now that castle is just a memory, just kind of disused and just like any other thing that he encountered and moved on from.
Chronologically, is this before 1-1 or after 1-1? You
Both.
know what I mean? Like, is this as Tim decides to set out on his journey? Or is this after he's decided not to pursue the princess?
I think it's after everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay.
I'm not sure what to say about the ending. I'm not sure if it's like there's definitely some
对
ambiguity here.
略开放
There's
的。
definitely a sense of learning, but like lingering confusion. And there's probably an ongoing process to like reflect and recontextualize his experiences. I mean, what happened with the princess there was a major revelation or recognition. And so maybe there's some like new self-knowledge there. I mean, the clouds are still, I think, associated with a degree of optimism, a possibility. So, you know, the pressure's released here. It's not the end of the road for Tim, but
it's time to
it's
move
time
on.
to move on.
You're right. It's time to move on. 啊，这个就属于 hidden puzzle 了。
Now there's the and if what were the good valuable things to notice, right? So that's like extremely
intrinsic and
unguided.
unguided.
And so the
没了。
epilogue is maybe an intermediate area between those things.
那这个世界你可能根本8个星星还是存在的，啊，还是存在的，管它呢。OK， 这样 commentary playthrough 算结束了，3期搞完。那我验证一下那个能不能直接通过，一定要跟公主合体之后你才能再看的，还是说现在8颗星星收集齐就已经可以看了？我觉得应该是可以看的。关键是看当你进到那个 epilogue 那个区域的时候，你几颗星星？我这个存档是8颗星星集齐的，所以应该是可以看的。I'm not sure。哦，从这儿开始啊，那肯定没问题。这一共应该是4个那个隐藏的嘛。看到没有？看到没有？这个是第一个，刚刚那是第2声啊，这地方有第2声对吧？对，有一声啊。你只要听到有这个的一声，就是提示，这是第2个。这里我是得有一声。哦，啊，这个是普通的 text， 这是第2个，然后这个地方是有第3个的，第3个好像在这儿。就每个这个 text 它都有一个前提条件，然后这个第4个，这块石头后面是第4个，然后就没了。这个4个 hidden text 下一期可以来看一下。这反正1个小时，既然到的话就先这样，就这样。下一期再战那个 speed run，我感觉可以再来搞一次，这样这个作品就算真正算是 OK 了。把 commentary 悉数搞定，然后 speed run 一共打3次，看能打多少时间。就那么稍微要求高一点嘛，42分钟，也不敢说人死。因为如果真的打得很顺的话，38、40都是有可能。但是上来就给自己头上套个绳子，这不是我的做事风格。OK， 这样 playthrough 搞定啊，下一期 speed run 搞完之后，反正就按这个，这个算逆时针嘛，逆时针上去。Sound music 好像东西并不是很多，只是这个东西看起来很复杂，就怎么一个顺序来一个一个看过去。包括这个设计，罕见的你这个居然是 Word 什么呢 ？Word 4是吧 ？Word 4的设计。OK， 先到这儿。